Hello and Happy New Year to everyone. Uh, Wishing everyone a happy and healthy 2021. This is the Manajek Hughes Sprint 152 review. Sprint 152 was longer than usual because many of us were on a winter break. So it lasted for 4 weeks instead of the usual 2 weeks. So as usual, I will give the overview. Harpreet will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, Joe on the platform, and Greg on the API. So Sprint 152 saw a return to numbers similar to Sprint 150. Um, just know that kind of the end of November is Thanksgiving here in the U.S. and things kind of start falling in terms of productivity and how much people are spending time working on things. So that's why Sprint 151 went down. It was around Thanksgiving, and then Sprint 152 went up because it's a 4-week sprint rather than a 2-week sprint. I expect us to get back to normal starting in Sprint 153 with a 2-week sprint there. In terms of the breakdown of all the pull requests that were merged, 30 were bugs, 42 were enhancements, and the rest were kind of all over the place. And with that, I turn it over to Harpreet.
Thank you, Oleg. Hello, everyone. Total of 13 PRs were merged in UI repos. There were 2 enhancements, 7 bug fixes, and a couple of React conversions. Add of VM snapshots and edit of cloud key pair forms were converted to React. Next slide, please. So the toolbar component was moved from React UI components to our UI classic repo. Patternfly components in the toolbars were replaced with Carbon components, and that involved some styling fixes and making toolbars accessible through keyboard. As you can see in before and after screenshots here, new toolbars look a bit different and nicer. And with that, next slide. Same changes as previous slide were made on the dashboard toolbars. That's the main dashboards where you have the widgets and you can add, remove widgets and do certain things, actions on the widgets, and also on the topology toolbars. So here you can see the dashboard widget toolbar. And with that, I guess over to Adam.
Thanks, Harpreet. So it was light sprint for providers as well. On the IBM Cloud side, we finished the culmination of a long period of time. A lot of work went into switching over to using OpenAPI for the SDK gem, which is being used for the IBM Cloud Power Virtual Servers Cloud Manager. There are actually 3 OpenAPI gems, Power, Resource Controller, and IAM. So we used to be using hand-built gems for these, and now we're building the gems based on the OpenAPI spec using the OpenAPI generator. There's work ongoing to do a similar change for the VPC side as well, so pay attention, look forward to that. For OpenStack, David added DDF schema for Cloud Volume Snapshot creation in the ongoing effort to move to DDF forms for more and more operations in the UI. On the VMware side, Lucy enhanced the OVF deployment process so that you can select target data centers, target folders, and target resource pools. Before it would just auto-select these and it wouldn't always pick the best options. So now that's using similar processes to the standard VM deployments. We also fixed an issue where destroyed VMs were not being archived. This is actually a really kind of deep issue where we were unintentionally overriding a core active record method, which was causing VMs which had an event to not ever get updated after they were destroyed. So that was an interesting one for sure. We also fixed an issue where certain IPv6 addresses were being treated like IPv4 based on the regular expression that we were using. it was actually matching on a component of the IPv6 address that looked like IPv4, and that was causing subsequent failures in the refresh. And that's it for providers. Next slide.
Okay, a total of 52 PRs were merged across the platform space in this extended sprint. Some of the highlights, starting with enhancements. One enhancement was contributed that will leverage systemd's watchdog to track the status of services for worker heart beating. Another enhancement added debug logging for the partified reconcile loop, which will help diagnose any potential failures in this space. File depot modes were added for cloud storage. Progress was made toward moving to Rails version 6.0 with 3 different PRs there. And progress was made on a larger effort to use Kafka for messaging instead of the internal Postgres-based MIQQ. By getting the Kafka configuration working with the new RD Kafka gem. That was what was accomplished this past sprint. One bug was fixed where the MIQ server status update method was failing in partified deployments. And there were a few improvements in the build space. And I thought I'd list them, but I'm not going to go through each one. Again, most of these were spearheaded by Satoe. Next slide, please. And another tip of the hat goes to Dan Hawkins for, once again, spearheading documentation improvements. I think Brandon and Alberto also contributed in this space. So a lot of improvements here. And that's it for the platform space. On to Greg for the rest of the story.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so I'm going through the API in Alberto's absence. So we had some enhancements and a couple of fixes. First one here is Lucy added an endpoint for editing network routers, actually enhanced the endpoint for network routers, so you can edit now with a post. It's an asynchronous request, so it'll return a task reference, and then you can query on that. Next slide, please. So David added a new endpoint for host aggregates. So this basically covers all the CRUD for host aggregates. You can do a get collection, get a single object, post, put patch, delete for editing, put patch for editing, and then deletes. And thankfully, David added a bunch of really nice examples in the PR. Too much to list here, so if you want to take a look at that, you can just click the link to go to the PR. Next slide, please. And David also added a simple get-only endpoint for shortcuts. This is work. A lot of this work actually is for supporting our transition to API-based UI. So this populates drop-down for shortcuts in the UIs that we're in the process of converting. And you can see an example there. Next slide, please. So Keenan did some work to fix an issue that actually has been around for a long time, where we were not properly returning errors, error status, HTTP statuses. So in the case of both single requests and bulk requests, errors were being reported in the body. So for each thing that failed, it would have an error message, but return to 200 even if it failed. So now, if it's a single request, we will return a proper error status code, a 400 status code. And for bulk requests, it's the same as before, where if the ones that fail will have the appropriate statuses and messages, and it would be a 200 if the request overall was successful. And David also did some work for fixing policy-related endpoint feature mappings. Changes were made on the core side for that, and this aligns the API product features to match what's on the core side for the classic UI. And I think that's it for the API. Next slide.
Okay, that brings us to our conclusion. I want to thank everyone for their contributions and the presenters for presenting. And once again, wish everybody a happy 2021, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks on January 20th. All right, thank you.
Recording has stopped.